Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Thursday morning. We're welcoming Sean McGillicuddy, the Vice President of Sales at TIE Software, once again to our show this morning. Sean, thank you for joining us on FreightWaves Now.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys again.
Great to see you as well. Let's get right into the hot topic this morning, all about automation. We talk about automation in every sector of freight and transportation. Let's talk about it specifically when it comes to brokerage.
Yeah, so for years now, obviously LTL brokerages can be quite automated. API integrations to carriers has allowed for full-scale automation on the LTL side. But one of the cool things about being on the software side of freight is you get to see some of the innovations that happen in these difficult times that we're seeing now. So with capacity constraints, we're starting to see some really cool capacity tools that might really help brokers start to automate the full truckload side. One thing that TIE has had for a while now is an email assistant tool that allows your spot quoting to be automated, where incoming emails from shippers can be scraped, built into your TMS, and then a quote can be returned on the full truckload side. And we're starting to see a much heavier adoption of those types of automations. But when we're in a constrained time like we are now, we're starting to see a heavy adoption of automating the capacity side. So your outreach to your trucking companies to find coverage. And, we're seeing some really cool innovation as a result of that early adoption of those types of tools. So it's really cool. We're in an exciting time for software, at least.
We certainly are, and for logistics as a whole, Sean, and welcome to the show again. It's been a while since we've talked. Anyways, always enjoy our conversations. Now, you mentioned LTL has been automated for a long time, right? And there's distinct differences. One, there's a lot more LTL shipments per day, right? Shipments, right? Maybe not volume of trucks moving or revenue, but shipments. So the necessity was there, right? Also ease, because you don't have like owner operators, and 95% of the LTL companies aren't like 4 trucks or less, right? So vetting those carriers is a lot easier. How well has that played, or how much has that played in the development of your software as far as on the carrier side or asset side, being able to automate that and know you're getting a quality carrier?
Right. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So on the LTL side, you've had these, it's dominated by these large trucking companies that have the technical capability to integrate with your TMS software. So that's something that's been able to be automated. Not so much on the truckload side, because it's fragmented. A lot of owner operators, a lot of smaller trucking companies that don't necessarily have that technical capability just yet. So what we're seeing is companies rush to innovate how to automate just that outreach to them, right? So you can't necessarily automate an owner operator being able to get you a quote right back. There's still a little bit of a manual process in place there. But what we are seeing heavy automation on is just the outreach to the exact correct carrier that you would want to work with. So one of the things we do inside our TMS is a scoring system. So when you have carriers that you enjoy working with, you can score those carriers, and it makes it so that they're always at the top of your list when you're looking for coverage. But what we're seeing through innovation, through some of our integration partners, is the ability to take that data and make sure that you reach out to those carriers immediately without your broker actually having to do any data entry or do any kind of, sitting there emailing every carrier or calling every carrier. Instead, we're seeing some really cool algorithms come in from our integration partners that know exactly, out of your top carriers, which ones are going to be in the area, potentially looking for a return haul, and it's going to get you the best price and going to have and really going to help deepen that relationship. We were talking about that on the last time I was on, was relationships with carriers. But if you can sort of automate that outreach to the top carriers, and you're making sure that they get the first grab, then that's going to help you deepen those relationships with carriers when you're giving them the loads that they want on the lanes that they want.
Sean, I've got kind of a twofold question for you, a two-parter, but both parts revolve around trust. When you're doing this automated outreach, as you mentioned, to the carrier side of things, how do you maintain trust with your carriers? And is there do you run the risk of making your carriers feel like they're getting just the same regurgitated email over and over and over again if it is that automation side? And then the second part, how do you build or maintain that trust with your shipper that if you're sending them an automated quote, that it's a good quote and that it's actually reliable and actually reflects the current state of the market?
Yeah, that is a great question, and that's definitely a risk when you're going to automate because, like we were saying on the last show I was on, we were talking about relationships with carriers, relationships with customers, super important, never going away in our industry, in my opinion. And but the ability to sort of customize those messages that go out, you're not necessarily trying to just send a cold email blast out to everybody. You're specifically reaching out to the carriers that are going to want that load. They operate heavily on that lane. They know they like working with you, and so your messages are more about like, hey, we want to give you the first shot at this, as opposed to some cold generic email that goes out to absolutely everybody. And a lot of times, what you do is you alert those carriers that, hey, this is what we're doing, so that you get the first shot at it. We don't want you to have to log into some portal and wait for us to put something on our load board for you. We want to just make sure you get this first. And really, the same thing on the shipper side. So when you're returning a quote to your customer, obviously you can't make the email sound cold, but we do need a way to lighten the burden on the brokerages for the spot quote market and the ability to return a quote quickly. So one of the risks that you have to be willing to take on is if you're going to produce an instant rate based on an algorithm and maybe a combination of market intelligence that you can combine those together. At least you can do that in our TMS, and you can return a quote, and you have to be reasonably certain that that's going to be accurate most of the time, to where you're not going to lose money, but you do have to be willing to potentially, eat a little bit of the cost on certain ones, because you're speeding up the process, and you're not going to be right absolutely every time. But if you can get close enough, you'll the brokers that do that tend to make a lot more money in the long run, as opposed to, they might lose a little bit of money here and there on certain shipments.
Yeah, Sean, there's so many angles that I'd like to go here. I'm thinking of like 5 different questions that I want to string together and ask you all at one time. So I'm going to try and do it this way. Is the controls in your software that you can set up as a broker, right? There's many different things as a broker that you want to manage in assigning carriers, or what carriers you reach out to, right? You want to give the carriers the lanes that they want. You don't want to bother specific carriers with lanes that they don't want to go to. You don't want to present carriers to the shippers who may have an issue with that carrier for whatever reason that you're not even involved in. And you don't want your brokers giving loads to just any old carrier. They need to be vetted. They need to have the proper insurance. They have to have the proper safety scores, et cetera, right? Talk about those control inputs that help with this automation, from pleasing the shipper to pleasing the carrier, and in between.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question.
There's a lot in that question, right? No, yeah. So touch on your favorite part of it, I guess.
No, that's okay. I actually, everything that you touched on is super relevant, and the thing is, brokers need an easy way to see that on one page, right? So top brokers are going to know exactly who they should be going to. They just have all this experience of who to reach out to as far as carriers are concerned, who wants what freight on which lanes, right? But how do you make it so that all of that information is in one place, so you could train a brand new broker on it? And one of the ways we address that, and it is you put all that information on one page. So your rate intelligence, wherever you're getting it from, it should display right at the top of your screen when you're looking for coverage. Your top carriers should be right on that same page. So when you sort of type in your shipment and you know what lane you're working, your database should be able to query your entire network of carriers, bump all the favorites to the top of the list, so you can look at those, look at your pricing intelligence, and then also be able to post to the load boards right from there, right? So that's one of the ways that we address that. So, if you don't have it in that format, then it can take a long time, because an experienced broker that's been around a long time, they might have all that information just in their head, and then they're trying to pass it along via spreadsheet, right? And then they're using their email inbox, and they're going to each individual load board, and they're looking at all these pricing intelligence tools. And one of the things we do is we bring all of that information into one page, all of those resources into one single page, so that you have basically a maximum of 5-minute process of looking at the rate that you should be getting charged for this lane, reaching out to all of your top carriers and posting on the load boards immediately, and then potentially utilizing the innovative tools that I'm talking about, which is some of our integration partners. And we can't talk about them all yet, but 2 in particular Trucker Tools and Parade are doing some really cool things with capacity and ways to automate it. But having all that on one page, being able to do that in a maximum of 5 minutes, which used to, I mean, if you think about going to all those different tools separately, that could be a pretty cumbersome process. I mean, it is a pretty cumbersome process for brokers when they're trying to do that for every single load that they're trying to find coverage for.
And when you automate that process, you save time and you make money. Sean, thank you for joining us this morning. If folks want to get involved with you guys at Tie Software, where should they go to do that?
Yeah, you can visit us at tie-software.com, and all information's there. So I appreciate you guys having me on.